One of the most remarkable things about Carver: A Life in Poems is the way you can go from these poems into really any academic discipline and create a unit that spans all these different subjects and keeps circling back to one extraordinary historical person and a collection of literary works about him. So, what could you do with science and the poems in this book? This book invites those sorts of connections once again because of the way it includes scientific names and the studies and the actual pictures and work that he is doing in his laboratory with students, things like that. So, based on all of that sort of context already provided here, I would jump, if I were making a science unit, into something like this. I would start with something that Professor Carver once wrote about engaging kids hands-on with science. A very large part of a child's education must be gotten outside of the four walls designated as classroom. The most effective and lasting education is the one that makes the pupil handle, discuss, and familiarize himself with the real things about him. George Washington Carver. And this is from Nature Study and Garden for Rural Schools in the bulletin of the Tuskegee Agricultural Experiment Station. And here is one of the pictures from that where we see these little tiny kids are part of a garden class that Carver is teaching. So, how do we recreate that? Well, for us, we'd probably start with something like a worksheet in the classroom. Because unlike the students in the rural South who would have been familiar with gardens, students in our classrooms today might not have seen gardens and garden tools before up close. So, we get with the basics of what do plants need to grow. If you're doing kindergarten age, you might lay it out for them and have them draw connections. If you're doing older students, or the students who'd be working with a book like this, maybe begin by asking them what they think plant needs to grow. And then take an actual field trip outside to a garden and discover what plants need. They need soil and mineral nutrients. They need light. They need air. They need time. And go back and now rewrite this with what you have learned. And if you're going from middle and high school students, which might be more appropriate even for a book like this, let's take it a step further and let's think about sustainable farming. Because we already know, perhaps by then, what a garden needs, but do we know what a garden needs to continue? Sustainable farming is a really big issue these days. And here are links like the National Peanut Board, where students could look up peanuts, which were the focus of so much of Carver's work and the innovations that he made in industry as well as in farming. And students could figure out why these peanuts mattered. They could do research on this board in this focused area and figure out how peanuts were part of sustainable farming. And then let's grow peanuts. If you were doing this for elementary age kids, you could put them in a glass jar and just the act of seeing the peanut grow would help them think about what it takes for a plant to grow. But if you were working with middle and high school students, you could take it a step further. In that glass jar, and why glass would matter, is you need to see the roots. Because it's not just the product, the peanuts, that are created by the peanut plant that matter, though it really did matter. Because Carver found so many ways those peanuts could be used, could be monetized, so that farmers could make a living off peanuts in the years between growing cotton, which was their main cash crop. But the reason they grew the peanuts between is because what's happening beneath the surface is that peanuts are nitrogen fixers, and in seeing those roots, students could, one, actually see it happening, like you do in this picture, that these roots are fixing the nitrogen in the soil, but two, could perhaps measure that nitrogen in the soil and actually experiencing it changing throughout the course of the year or the growing season that they're watching this, and then really experience the sustainable farming change made through crop rotation, which is something that Carver discovered. And so that is a way that you could go from literature to science all in one unit together. And here I even came up with an extra credit activity because I can't get enough Carver. The Library of Congress has a magnificent collection on Carver and his nature studies and how these were used in schools. So you can have students, for extra credit, go here. Look at the things that Carver actually did with students to get them to understand sustainable farming the same way students are doing now in their class, and create some sort of blog entries, some engaging, fun way to connect with this, because it was fun in the time it was done. It was done with pictures and little snapshots that are meant to draw the reader in. This was the blog of the day, a bulletin put out by the college. Now I have students redo that for our times to once engage a new generation with the innovations of Carver. So that is moving from literature to science.